पूजा रिकॉर्डिंग स्टार्ट हो रहा है। ओके। बाद में बोलती हूँ, ऑलरेडी स्टार्ट हो गया। Hello and welcome back everyone to another biology class of Fun Scholar. So today I, Shushmita ma'am, am going to end this chapter, that is nutrition in animals, the chapter of class 7 in CBSE board. So we have already done and seen 2 lectures on this chapter, and today it is the third and the last part of this chapter. So let's begin. So the thing is that on the board you can see this question: digestion begins in the mouth, but where does the process of digestion gets completed? So the thing is that we have already seen in the last 2 lectures the process of digestion that begins in the mouth and then continues in the stomach. And then after stomach comes another organ of the digestive tract, and that is the small intestine. So the thing is that we are now going to study about the process of digestion that occurs in the small intestine, and it is also known as the site of complete digestion. So that is why here the question is given that the digestion begins in the mouth, but where does it gets completed? So for your info, it gets completed in the small intestine. So now let us go in details of this. So small intestine is the site where the complete digestion of proteins, fats and carbohydrates occurs. And how does it take place? We'll know part by part. First of all, coming to the parts of the small intestine. Do you have any idea regarding this? Okay, let's see. See, the small intestine is divided into 3 parts. The first part is known as the duodenum, which is a short upper part of the small intestine, and it is about 12 finger breadths in length. The next part is jejunum, which is about 2 meters long and almost empty after death. So the thing is that since no food intake occurs after the death of an organism, so therefore nothing is left to be digested and to be absorbed in the small intestine. So jejunum is empty, which is also the literal meaning of its name. And last but not the least, the ileum is there, which is about 4 meters long, and it is responsible for twisting movements. So name is also meaning to twist, and this due to this twisting movement, the complete mixing with the intestinal juice, the pancreatic juice and all the digestive enzymes occur properly. Now let's watch a video regarding the role of particularly the duodenum portion of small intestine in the process of digestion.
In the previous video, we saw how the stomach aids the digestion process and forms a milky paste called chyme. What happens after that? Where is the chyme sent? To the duodenum, which is the first part of the small intestine. Its size is very small relative to the other parts of the digestive system. What's hard to believe is that most of the digestion happens here. Yes, it's a tiny part, but most of the digestion occurs in this region. Because most of the digestion happens here, it has to be the most interesting part of the digestive tract. And yes, it definitely is. 2 of the biggest glands of your body lie close to the duodenum, and both of them assist the duodenum numerous tasks. The biggest gland in your body is the liver, and it weighs around 1.5 kg. That's how heavy your liver is. It's an organ as well as a gland. And the second biggest gland is called the pancreas. Both these glands release juices which assist the digestion in the duodenum. Let's talk about the liver first. The liver performs many functions, but as far as digestion is concerned, it secretes a fluid called bile. And this bile juice, which is produced by the liver, is stored in the gallbladder. Yes, bile is secreted by the liver and stored in the gallbladder. To understand how bile aids the digestion process, we need to understand that fat particles cannot be broken down easily. It takes significant effort to break fat down, which is why it is broken down in two stages. First, the bile breaks the giant fat droplets down into tiny little droplets and mixes them with watery medium in the body. In scientific terms, we say that the bile emulsifies the fat, and the process is called emulsification. This was the first stage in which fat is broken down into tiny droplets. These droplets are broken down further by the enzymes present in the pancreatic juice secreted by the pancreas. That's where the pancreas come into the picture. These enzymes are able to act on the fat globules easily only because they are emulsified. Is that all the pancreatic juice does? Breaking down of fats? No, it does a lot more. If you remember, the hydrochloric acid in the stomach made the food acidic. So when the chyme enters the duodenum, it's still a bit acidic in nature. The pancreatic juice that is secreted by the pancreas is alkaline and it neutralizes the chyme. It is the bicarbonates in the juice that neutralize it. And this creates a favorable environment for the enzymes to function. Yes, the pancreatic juice also contains enzymes that digest proteins, starch, and fats. There are three main enzymes present in the pancreatic juice: trypsin, amylase, and lipase. What do they do? Which nutrients in the food do they break down? Trypsin breaks down the proteins or peptides to amino acids and smaller peptides. Peptides to smaller peptides. The pancreatic amylase converts the leftover starch to maltose, and the pancreatic lipase acts on emulsified fats to convert them to fatty acids and glycerol. So you can probably guess how vital the pancreatic juice is. It helps in neutralizing the food as well as in breaking the proteins, starch, and fats down to simpler substances. To review what we learned here, the bile juice breaks the big fat droplets down into tiny droplets, and this makes it suitable for the enzymes in the pancreatic juice to break them down further. And apart from fat, peptides as well as leftover starch are broken down. After a lot of heavy duty work in the duodenum, the food is passed to the next part of the small intestine, which we will understand in the next lesson.
So you have already watched in the video how the process of digestion in the duodenum part of the small intestine is aided by the bile juice and the pancreatic juice. Now we'll again recapitulate a bit. So we have already seen that the bile juice secreted by the liver is stored in the sac-like structure called the gallbladder, and this gallbladder releases the bile juice as and when it is required, and it then empties its content through the hepatic duct, or the hepatic duct and the duct from the gallbladder, that is the cystic duct, they merge together to form the common bile duct. That means the bile duct for both the hepatic duct and the cystic duct, and the contents of the gallbladder are then emptied into the duodenum. So it is produced in the liver, stored in the gallbladder, and then released through the hepatic duct or the common bile duct into the duodenum. and its function is emulsification of fats. That means breaking down of large fat droplets into the small fat droplets, because if we break down a large molecule into smaller molecules, the surface area will then increase many folds, and in doing this, the action of the enzymes as well as the bile juice will be more efficient in converting these droplets or fat molecules into the simplest form, that is the fatty acids and the glycerol. Now coming to the role of jejunum and ileum in the process of digestion. So let's watch another video regarding their function in this.
In the previous video, we saw how food is broken down in the duodenum. From the duodenum, it is passed to the second part of the small intestine called the jejunum. And the third part of the small intestine is the ileum. We saw that a lot of digestion happens in the duodenum. But in the jejunum and the ileum, a lot of absorption takes place. Yes, very little digestion and a lot of absorption. In this region, the food is completely digested and ready to be absorbed by our body. How is the food absorbed here? To understand how the food is absorbed, we need to look at the cross section of the small intestine. Now, the small intestine wants to absorb as many nutrients as possible at a given time. It wants to increase the efficiency of absorption. And the rate of absorption depends mainly on the surface area on the inside of the small intestine. If the surface area is more, clearly more nutrients will be absorbed. Normally, looking at this tube, we could assume the smooth surface inside to be the surface area, correct? That's not entirely right. Now, on the surface inside the tube, it has numerous finger-like projections called villi, which increase the surface area. This is how the actual image would look. All these little villi increase the surface area significantly. But the question is how? How can we say that the surface area has increased? To understand that, think of the small intestine being opened up like this, to look like a rectangular surface. If there was no villi, the nutrients would have been absorbed through the surface, and this would be the surface area. Now, on its surface, let's draw tiny finger-like projections. Does the surface area increase? Clearly it does. The surface area it stands on is just the area of its circular base. But the surface area that is exposed is the curved surface area of each villus. So by utilizing the same area to stand on, the villi significantly increases the surface area for absorption of nutrients. Because of this, the nutrients are absorbed really fast, and all that remains is undigested waste material and water. Remember, villi do not play any role in digestion. They just help in faster absorption of nutrients. We need to understand the structure of this villus in detail. This is one villus. To further increase the surface area, each villus has tiny little projections on them. And these are called microvilli. Yes, microvilli. Yes, these smaller or microvilli further increase the surface area for absorption. But does it significantly increase the surface area? To put it in perspective, the surface area for absorption increases from about half a square meter to approximately 200 square meters. Yes, about the size of an entire tennis court. Now, each villus has something called a central lacteal. A central lacteal is nothing but a projection of the lymphatic system. The broken down fat particles are absorbed through the central lacteal and passed into the lymphatic system. What about the proteins and carbohydrates? How are they absorbed? So each central lacteal is surrounded by a network of capillaries. They bring blood towards the villus and also take blood away from it. Let me repeat it for you. Each villus has a central lactea, and that central lactea is surrounded by a network of capillaries. And the broken down proteins and carbohydrates are absorbed directly into the bloodstream, directly into the capillaries. The fats are absorbed into the body through the central lactea, and the proteins and the carbs through the capillaries. That's an overview of how the small intestine works. A lot of digestion happens in the duodenum, and a lot of absorption happens in the jejunum and the ileum. The small intestine is nothing but a tube, and the food is absorbed through the villi, which are present at its inner surface. The undigested food is sent to the large intestine, which we will talk about in the next lesson.
So now again we have understood how the surface area is increased due to the presence of villi and the associated microvilli in the lumen of the small intestine, especially in the jejunum and ileum, where very small amount of digestion takes place, but rather a lot of absorption takes place. And in the ileum, the same thing is written there. The lacteal, talking about the lacteal, it absorbs the fatty acids and glycerol into the lymphatic system. Now, to sum up, what is a lymphatic system? Lymphatic system consists of the lymphatic vessels and the fluid called lymph. What is lymph? Lymph is a clear watery fluid which is formed from the blood plasma. And how is it formed? When blood passes through the thin capillaries. Capillaries are actually only one cell thick. So therefore, the components of the blood plasma can leak through the capillaries and come around the cells of the body, and those are then drained. That forms the lymph, and then that watery clear fluid like substance called lymph gets collected by the lymphatic vessels and are again drained back to the systemic circulation to maintain the fluid balance of the body. Now this lymph, the lacteal is a part of the lymphatic system only. So this lacteal absorbs the fats in the form of fatty acids and glycerol and drain them again into the blood stream. And apart from it, the intestinal juices are also secreted within the intestine, that is consisting of the amylase, protease, lipase and disaccharidase. We have already seen that the disaccharides, that are the maltose, sucrose and the lactose, they are the disaccharides. That means they consist of two types of simple sugars or two types of monosaccharides, and the enzyme which breaks them down are known as disaccharidase. Sucrase, when sucrase acts on sucrose, it breaks down into glucose plus fructose. Next, maltose breaks down into two molecules of glucose. And lastly, into glucose plus galactose. Right. So therefore, sucrose, the disaccharide sucrose breaks down into two monosaccharides called glucose and fructose. Then maltose disaccharide breaks down into two molecules of glucose, and lastly lactose disaccharide breaks down into the monosaccharides glucose and galactose. So these are the intestinal juices which are secreted and breaks down the maltose and other the simpler forms of the disaccharides which have been converted from starch, and along with that the proteins are converted into amino acids that you have watched in the video, and the fats are emulsified by the bile juice, and then they are acted upon by the pancreatic lipase to be converted into fatty acids and glycerol, and then absorbed by the lacteals. So what is now pyloric sphincter? We have already watched about this in the video. So this is also for recapitulation. It is a ring of smooth muscles that controls the movement of chyme from stomach to duodenum. So therefore the entry point to the duodenum is guarded by it is just like a valve. The valve which we see in case of heart, so it acts like a valve. It doesn't allow the food that has already entered the duodenum to go back to the stomach. So the chyme, the acidic chyme which is formed in the stomach as a result of the churning, and so that is then released into the duodenum in small portions in order to aid the process of digestion. And if it had been released all together, so the process of digestion would have been very clumsy and haphazard, and it would have taken a lot more time to digest the entire lump of food. So therefore, in order to prevent such situation, the chyme is released into the duodenum in small quantities, and this is controlled by a ring of smooth muscles. Why smooth muscles? Because we know smooth muscles are involuntary in nature. So we cannot control that. So it acts according to its own will, because we cannot control that how and when the food will enter from the stomach to the small intestine. So it will be regulated on its own. That is why presence of involuntary smooth muscles is a must in such cases. So now we have already seen the role of liver and pancreas. The same thing is given here, that as the surgeon needs the help of its assistants and nurses, so glands actually act like assistants in the process of digestion. Right from the mouth to the stomach, and then the small intestine, or in the entire alimentary canal, or in the entire GI tract, the glands are present at each locations, so that the proper enzymatic or the digestive juices can be released, and the process of digestion can be very smooth. So we already know that liver produces the bile juice, and then gallbladder stores and release the bile juice as and when required, and pancreas release the pancreatic juice consisting of trypsin, which digests the peptides into the amino acids, amylase which convert the starch into the maltose, and the lipase which converts the emulsified fat or the droplets of fat into fatty acids and glycerol. Now, what is the role of bile juice? So, the role of bile juice is that it makes the medium acidic to activate the pancreatic enzymes. We have already seen in the video that the chyme which enters the duodenum from the stomach, so that is acidic, because that has been acted upon by the acid, hydrochloric acid in the stomach. So in order to make it alkaline, so bile juice creates that alkaline environment. It contains the bicarbonate ions which help to neutralize that acidity, and in doing this it also activates the pancreatic enzymes to act upon that chyme. And also another function of bile juice is to emulsify the large fatty drops into the smaller droplets, so that the surface area can be increased and the efficient action of the pancreatic lipase can be carried out. So this is the emulsification of fat from a large globule to the small droplets. As I told you, the small surface area, you can see if we include this, only the surface area of this sphere, because these are all 3D structures, right? We are now trying to understand in the 2D, but actually in the real scenario, these are the 3D structures. So imagine a ball. So therefore, the only the surface area of the sphere is the area of this large fat globule. Now if I divide the ball into many small balls, so the surface area of all the balls will definitely be more than the surface area of a single large ball. And also the enzymes can efficiently act on each small fat droplet, and in this way the process will be also a speedy one. So as compared to acting on the large fat globule, the process will be a speedy and efficient one if the enzyme acts on the small fat droplets. So we already have known about this, that trypsin digests the remaining proteins, amylase digests the remaining carbohydrates, and lipase digests the emulsified fats. Now coming to the pancreatic juices once more, what are the enzymes contained in the pancreatic juice as a whole? So it contains amylopsin, which is nothing but the other name of pancreatic amylase, which breaks down the starch into maltose. And then the intestinal juice, which contains disaccharidase, breaks down this maltose into two molecules of glucose, which is the simplest form of carbohydrate. Then trypsin is there, which breaks down the proteins and polypeptides into smaller peptides. And this trypsin is activated by enterokinase enzyme, which is produced by the inner lining of the duodenum. So to understand this cascade mechanism again, that means step by step mechanism, there is a flow chart given here. So trypsinogen is the inactive form of the enzyme trypsin. So this enzyme is activated by enterokinase, which is secreted by the inner lining of the duodenum of small intestine. And then this activated form of trypsin act on proteins and polypeptides to convert them into smaller peptides and amino acids. Similarly, starch is converted to maltose by the enzyme amylase, and the emulsified fat is converted into fatty acid and glycerol by the pancreatic lipase, which is also known as the CBSE enzyme. So these are the components of the pancreatic juice, which helps in the complete digestion of the different types of nutrients in the duodenum. So therefore, this is a list of the enzymatic action in digestion right from the mouth to the small intestine, means wherever the process of digestion takes place. It begins with the mouth. In the mouth, we have already studied in our previous lectures that the enzyme salivary amylase, which is also known as ptyalin, it converts starch into maltose, right? And then coming to the stomach, the food passes to stomach through the peristaltic movement of the food pipe or esophagus, and then the gastric gland secrete the gastric juice, and in the gastric juice the enzyme pepsin is there, which digests the proteins into polypeptides. Now the chyme, the acidic chyme, passes to the small intestine in the duodenum part through the pyloric sphincter, and then there the enzyme which are present in the pancreatic juice like amylopsin converts starch to maltose. The leftover starch has not been converted to maltose in the mouth, so the leftover starch is converted to maltose. Then trypsin converts the proteins and other polypeptides into amino acids, and trypsin acts on the emulsified fats and convert them to fatty acids and glycerol. And then in the ileum, you can see the enzymes which I have already talked about, the maltase, sucrase and the lactase. These three in total are known as disaccharidase. disaccharidases, right? Because they all act on disaccharides and convert them into monosaccharides, the simplest form of sugars. Now, and lastly, lipase is there, intestinal lipase, which convert the fats into fatty acids and glycerol, and then they are absorbed by the villi into the lacteals and the surrounded blood capillaries. So see, this is in the form of a flow diagram again, that how the intestinal enzymes bring about the final step of digestion. Proteins are converted to amino acids, carbohydrates into simple sugars, which is nothing but the glucose only, and other monosaccharides that we have seen like the fructose, galactose, and then fats are converted into fatty acids and glycerol. Now, this is a fact for all of you that herbivores eating grass need a longer, smaller intestine to allow the cellulose to be digested. Meat is easier to be digested. So therefore, carnivores like tigers have a short, small intestine. So, and what about the omnivores? Any idea? Yes, obviously, it is very evident that it will be intermediate between the two, because we take both the plant products and also the animal products. But the thing is that our small intestine is not so long as that of the herbivores, because although we do take the plant products, but we cannot digest the cellulose, because in order to digest the cellulose, herbivores have a special type of enzyme which is known as cellulase, which act on cellulose which is present in the cell wall of the plant cell and help them to digest that. So therefore, whatever plant products we take, that forms the part of the dietary fiber, and it is excreted out through the fecal matter. And the meat is relatively the easy part to be digested. So therefore, the human beings have the enzymes, because meat contains mostly the proteins and also fats. So we have got the enzymes to digest the proteins and the fats, but we do not have the enzymes to digest the cellulose present in the plant cell wall. Now coming to absorption. Small intestine and large intestine play a major role in absorbing nutrients and other components from the digested food. We have already watched in the video how villi and microvilli play a vital role in absorbing the nutrients that have been completely broken down in the duodenum, so in their absorption in the bloodstream. So they are mainly present in the jejunum and ileum area of the small intestine. See, small intestine works like nutrient strainer. Just like in the strainer, what happens? Only the desirable particles, strainer acts as a selective membrane through which the desirable particles can pass through, but the undesirable particles get captured on the other side as the residue. Similarly, in the small intestine, the nutrients which are broken down, such as the amino acids, then the simple form of glucose and other monosaccharides, and the fatty acids and glycerol, only they are absorbed into the bloodstream, and the other particles are then passed on as the residue of the digested food to the next part of the alimentary canal, that is the large intestine, for the bowel formation. So you can see on one side the bloodstream is there, and this side the small intestine wall is there, and the nutrients are getting absorbed from the part of the small intestine. Nutrients are getting absorbed into the bloodstream, but it doesn't allow the materials which cannot be digested. For example, I told the cellulose also, right? So those elements cannot be digested and they are passed on to the next section. Villi, we have already studied that they are finger-like projections seen on the inner surface, and their main function is to increase the surface area for absorption of nutrients. So in this way, the nutrients can be absorbed in larger quantity and also at a greater speed because it also contains microvilli on its surface. So in this way, they actually aid in the fast and efficient absorption of nutrients from the jejunum and ileum area of small intestine, and they are supplied with vessels and lacteal from the lymphatic system, which help in absorbing these nutrients and passing them on to the bloodstream for supplying to all the cells of our body. See, this is a diagrammatic representation that what will happen to the food that is absorbed in the villas. Obviously, the blood is coming, it will absorb the food materials and then it will pass to the bloodstream, and then the blood will carry all the nutrients to the cells of the body. Now, the next section is about the assimilation. What do you mean by assimilation? So, the biological process of moving or absorbing the digested food molecules into the different cells of the body for utilization. So, we have absorbed the nutrients. Right. Now, as I told you, all the nutrients will be moved to all the cells of the body, and when it reaches the cells of the body, there it will be again absorbed by the cell membrane, and then it will be utilized for different functions such as repairing of old tissues, building new tissues, and for production of energy in the form of ATP in the mitochondria. Right. So, therefore, these are the three domains particularly for which energy is required in our body, and for that purpose the nutrient which is absorbed needs to be broken down. So therefore the absorbed nutrients need to go and again get assimilated in all the cells of our body in order to perform these necessary life-saving processes of our system. Now we will watch a video regarding assimilation and try to understand what it really is and how it happens in our body system. So let's watch it.
As we have seen in the earlier videos, the end products of digestion, like glucose, amino acids, vitamins, and minerals, get absorbed by the body. All this happens in the small intestine. Parts of the small intestine called the jejunum and ileum is where maximum absorption happens. If you remember, tiny finger-like projections called villi increase the surface area and allow faster absorption. The food that has been digested is now in the internal environment of the body, and that will now be converted into body substances which become a part of the organism. This is assimilation. Assimilation takes place in the cells while the digestion happens in the alimentary canal. But where do the nutrients go? Are they distributed directly, or do they go to a central point to get distributed accordingly? Yes, they go to a central point, which is the liver. The liver acts as a checkpoint and control center for the release of appropriate amount of nutrients in the circulatory system. In our previous videos, we had also seen that liver secretes bile, which helps in digesting fat. But its key function is to process the nutrients absorbed in the small intestine. But how are the different nutrients utilized by the body? Let's talk about the three main kinds of nutrients. Glucose, which is broken down from carbohydrates, fatty acids and glycerol, which are broken down from fat, and lastly, amino acids, which are a broken down form of proteins. These are the three main kinds of nutrients which have been broken down and are ready to be absorbed into the body. What exactly happens with glucose? Remember, glucose provides energy to the body, but only when the body needs it. stored and appropriately used as and when the body demands it. And the glucose be stored? No, it cannot be stored as glucose. Glucose is converted into insoluble glycogen, which is stored as an energy reserve. Yes, the liver converts the glucose to glycogen, which can be stored. But the body needs glucose, right? Well, the glycogen gets converted back into glucose when the body demands it. Glucose is converted to glycogen to be stored and converted back to glucose when deemed appropriate. And the excess glucose is converted to fats by the liver and stored in the adipose tissue. That completes the assimilation of glucose. What about the fat products and amino acids? The fat products of digestion get converted to fatty substances like cholesterol. Fatty acids and glycerol act as energy reserves and are stored under the skin or around the organs. And now we come to the last bit. Amino acids are used in the repair of damaged parts of the body and for growth as well. Excess amino acids cannot be stored and are converted into urea and excreted as urine. So this is how food is assimilated in the body. It is absorbed into the bloodstream and is used to provide energy and materials for growth and repair of the body.
So now in the video you have already watched regarding assimilation, which I have discussed before the video. So one thing I would like to mention, that in the process in which you have seen that glucose is converted to glycogen, that process is known as glycogenesis. Genesis means production. So the process through which glycogen is produced from the glucose is known as glycogenesis, and the process that you have watched in the video in which glycogen is broken down to glucose, that is known as glycogenolysis. Lysis means breaking down. So therefore, these are the two processes. One is the buildup of glycogen, that is the stored form of glucose, and another is the active form, for that is the conversion of glycogen into glucose, that is the active form of the glycogen, which can be now converted into energy. So now we'll learn about large intestine. Just like small intestine, large intestine also is divided into three parts. What are the parts of large intestine? The large intestine has three parts, namely the large intestine, cecum, colon, and rectum. Cecum is the small portion which is after the ileum of small intestine, and then colon is the longest part. If I explain you, so this portion is the cecum, right? This is the ascending colon, this is the transverse colon, and again this is the descending colon. It is rising, that is why it is ascending colon. It is present horizontally, that is why transverse colon, and this is descending down, so therefore this is descending colon, and this portion is the rectum, right, which is marked here. This is the rectum, and then after rectum, anus is there, so through which that is the opening through which the fecal matter will be excreted out. Now Let's watch a video regarding the role of large intestine, rectum and anus in the process of digestion.
The undigested and the unabsorbed food from the small intestine is passed into the large intestine or the colon. And it's called large because its passage is wider relative to that of the small intestine. It begins here at this point and ends at the rectum. Now observe the shape of the large intestine. It's like an inverted U. The food enters at this point, travels, and reaches the rectum. This part where the food moves up against the gravity is called the ascending portion. The food ascends, and this portion on top is called the transverse portion. A transverse is something that extends across something, and this part where the food travels downwards is called the descending portion. Ascending, transverse, and descending. The large intestine ends with the sigmoid colon. Ascending, transverse, descending, and sigmoid colon. What happens in the large intestine? The most important thing that happens here is absorption. But is it absorption of nutrients? No, it's mainly the absorption of water. Absorption of water into the bloodstream. And very little absorption of inorganic ions like sodium or potassium takes place. The remaining solid or semi-solid waste that remains is passed on to the rectum, which is the lowest part of the large intestine. The rectum is where this waste is stored before being thrown out of the body. And this waste, which is called feces, is digested out of our body through the anus. The anus is a canal at the end of the digestive tract. The anal sphincters relax and food is digested out of the body. That pretty much completes the topic of the digestive system. Food is taken in from the mouth and then it's broken down to simpler substances to get absorbed into the body, and the undigested food is then expelled through the anus. In the coming lessons, we will understand more about absorption and assimilation.
So we have already understood now that large intestine plays a role in the absorption of mainly water and some inorganic salts such as sodium, potassium and sometimes a few drugs, right? The medicinal drugs which we intake, so those are also absorbed. So and then it passes to the rectum for temporary storage before being excreted out through the opening where the alimentary canal also ends, that is the anus. See, the formation and temporary storage of feces takes place in the rectum and absorption of molecules from the undigested food. Now, what is egestion? The process of elimination of undigested food from the body, and it is then actually in the compact form. We have already seen that when we break down the solid food particles, we form mushy, we can say a lump of food, and then when it gets mixed up with the digestive juices in the stomach first, then it gets converted into a semi-solid milky substance called the chyme. So in this, and then it travels to the small intestine and large intestine, and where it again gets compacted due to absorption of water. So therefore the undigested food which leaves the body via the anus, and that opening of the anus to release the fecal matter is controlled by the another ring of smooth muscle cells only, so that is the anal sphincters. And also this anal sphincters is the actually the last pump, right? It acts as a last valve which actually allows us to open and release them when there is the excess storage of the fecal matter in the rectum. So the rectum actually stores the fecal matter until and unless it is filled up, and then the feedback is sent. The feedback mechanism always works in our body. So the feedback is sent to the brain when we get the sensation to release the fecal matter by opening the anal sphincter. So this is how the whole process of digestion works, right from ingestion to the egestion. Now, diarrhea and oral rehydration solution. What is this? What is diarrhea? Diarrhea is a condition in which the digestion of our body system that is disturbed and that becomes faulty. So what happens? Digestion doesn't take place and the food that we intake is lost along with the absorption of a lot of water from our body. So therefore this condition happens when our body is infected either with some of the infections such as the amoebic dysentery, or by food poisoning, or by taking in some spicy food on a regular interval of time, which hampers our digestive system. So there are various causes, but it actually leads to frequent watery stools to be excreted by the body. So this is a condition in which we say that the digestion is not occurring properly, because we have seen when place the compact absorption. Therefore what happens, watery stools is released and at regular interval, which is very frequent. And for treating that, we have the oral rehydration solution, that is ORS in short. So what is ORS? So when water is released in large quantities and in frequent intervals, so what our body loses a lot of electrolytes also, the inorganic salts along with the water. So our body becomes very weak, the blood pressure also drops down, and the fluid balance of our body is also disturbed. So in order to replenish all those things, the oral rehydration solution consists of sugar and salt solution, so that our body regains that all the glucose. In order to, sugar contains the glucose, so therefore our body can get the glucose for energy, and salt means consisting of the components NaCl, that is sodium chloride. So sodium and chloride both are the electrolytes. So the fluid balance as will be maintained in our body, will be replenished back, and also our body will gain the energy which has been lost due to the loss of the electrolytes, and also due to passing of watery stools at frequent intervals. So therefore, the timely treatment with ORS can be critical for recovery from diarrhea. So it is a very serious condition and it should be attended at the earliest. So if left untreated, so this condition can be very serious and even fatal, because the continuous loss of electrolytes and water can lead to the drop of blood pressure, which in turn can lead to cardiac arrest at the extreme condition. So now we'll try to understand digestive system of ruminants. But before that, we have to understand what are ruminants. So ruminants are actually the grass-eating animals such as the cows, buffaloes, and the other organisms which particularly depend on grass. So they have got the specialized stomach which is known as the rumen. So therefore from this stomach only, they have got the name as ruminants. So the animals, the herbivore animals which bear rumen in their digestive system, those animals are called as ruminants. So, and what is rumen? A specialized stomach chamber that stores and partially digests grass. So once they eat the grass and send that to the stomach, they what happens in our case, the peristaltic movement is a one-way passage. It gets the food to the stomach, right? But in their case, the food from the stomach can also come back when they are not taking the food. So during that time when they are resting, they take the food out through from the stomach and again start to completely chew and digest that. So that is known as chewing the cud. So, and what is cud? Cud is the partially digested food. So since when they are sitting or resting, they keep on chewing the cud. So it is what? It is the partially digested food which is taken back from the rumen. And what is the role of bacteria in the rumen in this? The rumen contains bacteria that help break down the cellulose, which is a complex carbohydrate that is found not only in grass but in all the plant products. As I told you, it is a composition of the cell wall of the plant cell. So therefore, the herbivores which dwell or who actually eat grass and other plant products, they have got this bacteria who can digest the cellulose, and along with that they have got the enzyme called cellulase which help them to digest cellulose. So why humans cannot digest cellulose? I already told you, humans lack a rumen. We cannot take back the food to our mouth. One, we have ingested it and sent it to the stomach. So until and unless we vomit it, that's a different issue. But otherwise, we cannot take back the partially digested food which has been mixed with the HCl to our mouth and then digest it. Our mechanism is completely different. So, but in their case, the bacteria which are required to digest cellulose, they are present, and the fibers of the plants can be digested efficiently. So you can see here also other animals such as other herbivore animals, that means the horses, rabbits, etc. They have got large sac-like structure called cecum between. We also have got cecum, but after small intestine and before colon. So we have got cecum there, but their cecum is a sac-like structure which is located between the esophagus and the small intestine. So the cellulose of the food is digested here by the action of certain bacteria. So this bacteria is not present. You can see here that the esophagus and the cecum is there, then the colon, and the cecum is a large sac-like structure. But in our case, it is not a large sac-like structure, it is very small structure, and that is not very functional because it forms a part of the colon only. So therefore, the cecum is not a specialized one in our case, just like the grass-eating or the herbivore animals. So again, the last portion of it, we will try to understand the digestion in an amoeba. So let's watch the last video regarding that.
The stages of digestion in amoeba are not too different from that in humans. They take in food, they digest it and absorb the nutrients, then it's assimilated and the undigested waste is digested. But the way in which these stages occur is different. Amoeba does not have a mouth, so the food intake can pretty much happen from any part of the body. Unlike humans, the amoeba can constantly change its shape, and to consume food, it forms tiny finger-like projections called pseudopodia. The pseudopodia surround the food and completely engulf it to form a body around it. The pseudopodia join around the food particle and trap it in a food vacuole. The food vacuole is nothing but a temporary stomach. The food vacuoles contain enzymes which break the food down into digestible nutrients and are later absorbed by the amoeba for growth. Once the nutrients are absorbed, the food vacuole disappears. The nutrients from the food are directly absorbed by the body of the amoeba, which is called the cytoplasm. It is because of the movement of the cytoplasm that all parts of the cells are able to get the nutrients, and these nutrients are used mainly for growth and maintenance. What about the undigested waste? The undigested waste is thrown out of the body through a temporary rupture anywhere in the cell wall. That's the overall digestion process in amoeba. The steps are the same, just that it happens a bit differently. Let's review the important points quickly. The pseudopodia are tiny finger-like projections around its body, and they are used to consume the food. The food vacuole breaks the food down, which can then be absorbed by the amoeba. The nutrients are directly absorbed by the body of the amoeba, the cytoplasm, and the undigested food is thrown out of the body. The amoeba, by the way, is a single-celled organism, and it can feed only on other microscopic organisms and sometimes on other amoeba too. Did you know that to prevent cannibalism, the amoeba secretes a chemical which keeps other amoebas away? And this kind of secretion can also protect the amoeba from other predators.
So therefore, what did we watch? We watched that since amoeba we know is a unicellular organism. So it does not need a transportation system or a circulatory system just like human beings or other animals to circulate the nutrients absorbed to distribute to all the cells of the body. It is made up of a single cell only, and therefore the feeding and digestion in amoeba is a very simple process. How does it happen? It happens through a process called as endocytosis and exocytosis. What is that? You have already watched in the video that first it captures the food, that amoeba will engulf the food by extending pseudopodia. Pseudopodia. Pseudo means false and podia means feet. So the term relates to false feet. So why? Because the feet is not present all the time. Whenever they come in contact with any nutrient or any food particle, then only they are formed, because the cell membrane, it is not rigid but it is very flexible, and then after the engulfing of the food particle it disappears. So it is false feet, and it helps to trap the food in a vacuole known as food vacuole. And within the food vacuole, digestive juices are present which will break down the nutrient particle into the simplest forms of nutrients, and which will be absorbed by the body. That means the cytoplasm that you have watched in the video, and will be distributed to other cell organelles present in that single cell, and the waste will be expelled out of the body through the process of exocytosis. So the taking it of food is known as endocytosis. Endo means in and cytosis means by the cell. So cyto means by the cell. So taking in food by the cell of amoeba is known as endocytosis, and the expulsion is known as exocytosis. So this is a very simple procedure because they are unicellular organisms and there is no complexity regarding the intake, digestion and the expulsion of the waste products. So thank you so much for being there with me and for being associated with Fun Scholar. I hope you have got a brief idea about the process of digestion mainly in human beings, and along with that in other animals and also in herbivores as well as in single cell organisms such as amoeba. So stay tuned. We'll meet once again in the next lecture on a different topic. Thank you so much.